My dad claimed it was too dangerous. He took out a $625,000 loan for Joseph's BMW and failing dreams after I asked him for $65,000 to start my IT company. He wants me to sell my house to save them now. I kicked them off my porch, and now I 34M for much of my life. I thought that if I worked hard and didn't give up, my family would eventually respect and support me. I was mistaken. Completely wrong. But that mistake made me make something they could never have dreamed of. I had only 4 words for them when they came back crawling with their hands out. Leave my land. The story begins with 2 boys and their parents, who somehow convinced themselves that love was a limited resource that could only be given to one child at a time. My brother is 3 years older than me. Joseph is 31 years old. He was the most important person in our household from the time he could walk. Not because he was very good at what he did, but because he had this strange capacity to make everything about himself and play the victim when things didn't go his way. I was the one who was responsible as I was growing up. Did homework without being told to. The duties are done and the room is spotless. Joseph was the charmer with the crooked smile, and all of a sudden, everyone forgot that he had just broken something or failed another test. Robert and Linda, my parents, owned a small accounting firm. They weren't rich, but they were doing well. There was no doubt that favoritism was going on. My dad believed the $600 summer coding camp was too pricey when I was 12 and my computer science teacher suggested it. But when 11-year-old Joseph asked for horseback riding classes that cost $150 each, my parents somehow found enough in that same budget for a full semester, with gear and boots. I wanted to pursue advanced computer science classes for $800 a year when I was 16. They felt it was too pricey. My parents found the money for 15-year-old Joseph to join an elite travel baseball club that cost $8,000 a season. They even got him a bat that cost $1,200. Finn, sweetie, you're already quite proficient with computers. My mother told me with that gentle smile I'd learned to despise that I didn't actually need formal classes. Joseph's coach, on the other hand, feels he has a lot of potential. This could lead to scholarships or perhaps a job as a professional. Joseph's true potential only lasted 1 season, and he quit because he missed practices and got benched. The total cost was more over $12,000. The cost of my computer science program is still too high. I graduated from high school with a 3.9 GPA and a partial scholarship to State University. My celebration dinner at Olive Garden lasted 30 minutes before the conversation turned to Joseph's hard time adjusting, which mostly involved skipping classes and getting caught smoking weed behind the gym. My parents started their effort to save me. 3 times a week, at $80 an hour tutor, fewer chores, an easier course load, and maybe even private school if his grades didn't get better. Finn? My uncle inquired. What are the plans for paying for college? The awkward quiet told it all. Finally, my mom said, Finn is so independent. He has already received that partial scholarship and has been working part-time. He'll be okay. That was it. At my graduation dinner, Joseph's academic rescue mission turned into a family planning meeting. I learnt that day that being the responsible one merely meant being taken for granted. I sat there thinking what I would have to do to receive even a little bit of their attention. But it also taught me something else. If I wanted to be successful, respected, or safe, I would have to make it happen myself. And I did. I worked 25 hours a week at the university IT help desk and took out student loans to pay for the rest of my college. Our parents suddenly had enough money for Joseph's tuition, room and board, a meal plan, and a brand new Jeep Wrangler for his 18th birthday. The reason was always the same. You are very independent, Finn. You've always been able to solve problems on your own. Joseph needs more help and direction. What they truly meant was that it was easy to ignore me and hard to deal with Joseph. So, they took the easiest way out. The Jeep was the last thing that pushed me over the edge. I had been driving a 1998 Honda Civic that had 200,000 miles on it and a damaged air conditioner. I worked summers and weekends to save up $3,000 to buy a good used car that wouldn't break down on the way to university. When I told my parents about this, my dad said I should keep driving the Honda until it broke down totally. Joseph returned home from his graduation party 2 weeks later in a shiny new Jeep Wrangler. bright crimson, with a raised suspension and a high-end sound system. My mother was practically in tears, talking about how proud she was that they could give him such a nice graduation gift. It's important for Joseph to have reliable transportation, she explained to me later when I asked how they could afford a $35,000 vehicle after telling me I should drive my dying Honda until it literally stopped running. What about my transportation? I asked. Your Honda still runs, doesn't it? That was the moment I realized I was never going to be their priority. Not when I was 12 and wanted to learn coding. Not when I was 16 and wanted advanced classes. Not when I graduated with honors. Not ever. After college, I landed a job at a small software company in Austin called TechFlow Solutions. The pay was decent for an entry-level position, $52,000 a year, and the work was challenging. More importantly, I was good at it. Really good. Within 6 months, I was debugging code that had stumped developers with 5 years more experience. Within 2 years, I was leading development projects. Within 4 years, I was managing a team of 12 developers and pulling down $85,000 annually. I was learning everything I could about the business side of tech, staying late to sit in on sales calls, reading every book I could find about startups and venture capital. I subscribed to TechCrunch, Wired, and Harvard Business Review. I attended local entrepreneur meetups on weekends and networking events after work. I was obsessed with understanding not just how to build software, but how to build software businesses. Joseph, meanwhile, had dropped out of college after 3 years and 6 different majors. He'd started with business administration, switched to communications, tried marketing, dabbled in sports management, flirted with psychology, and finally landed on general studies before giving up entirely. He'd moved back home and was working part-time at a friend's father's car dealership while talking about his big plans. The plans changed every few months, but the pattern stayed the same. Big dreams, zero follow-through, and constant financial support from our parents. First, he was going to start a luxury car rental business. Then he was going to get into cryptocurrency mining. Then he wanted to become a social media influencer. Then he discovered day trading. Then it was real estate flipping. Then back to luxury car rentals, but with a twist. This time he'd also offer chauffeur services. Each new idea was presented to our parents with the enthusiasm of someone who just discovered fire. Joseph would create elaborate PowerPoint presentations, print out articles from Entrepreneur magazine, and talk for hours about market opportunities and projected profits. And every time, without fail, my parents would nod along like he was pitching the next Amazon. I watched this cycle repeat for years, sitting at Sunday dinners while Joseph explained his latest scheme, and my parents hung on every word. When he talked about crypto mining, my father actually researched graphics cards to help him build a rig. When he mentioned day trading, my mother opened a joint investment account with him. When he pivoted to real estate, they started driving around with him to look at potential flip properties. None of it ever went anywhere. The crypto rig mined exactly 0 coins before Joseph got bored and sold the components. The day trading account lost $8,000 in 6 months. The real estate venture never got past the window shopping phase. But somehow, Joseph's failures were always reframed as learning experiences, while my successes were treated as expected outcomes that required no celebration or acknowledgement. By the time I was 28, I'd saved $35,000 and had identified a gap in the market that I was uniquely positioned to fill. During my 4 years at TechFlow, I'd worked on projects for dozens of different industries, but construction companies were consistently the most frustrated with their software options. Construction project management is incredibly complex. You're dealing with multiple subcontractors, constantly changing timelines, material deliveries, weather delays, permit issues, inspection schedules, and budget constraints that shift daily. The software solutions available were either generic project management tools that didn't understand construction-specific needs or industry-specific tools that were so complex they required dedicated IT staff to operate. I'd been moonlighting on a concept for months, building prototypes on nights and weekends. The idea was specialized project management software for mid-sized construction companies, firms that were too big for basic project management tools, but too small for enterprise-level construction software. I talked to dozens of contractors and construction managers during my research. The response was overwhelmingly positive. These companies were desperate for something that could handle their specific workflows without requiring a computer science degree to operate. One contractor, a guy named Bill, who ran a residential construction company with about 40 employees, put it perfectly. We need something that can track our jobs, our subs, our materials, and our schedules without making us feel like we need to hire a tech guy just to enter data. I'd built a working prototype that addressed exactly that need. It was intuitive enough for a foreman to use on a job site, powerful enough to handle complex multi-phase projects, and designed specifically for the construction industry's unique requirements. More importantly, I had validation. I'd shown the prototype to 15 different construction companies, and 12 of them said they'd pay for the software if I could build the full version. I had letters of intent totaling over $180,000 in potential first-year revenue. The problem was I needed capital not just for development costs but for proper market research, legal fees to set up the business entity, trademark and patent applications, initial marketing, office space, and enough runway to support myself while I got the company off the ground. I'd done detailed financial projections showing I needed approximately $65,000 total. I had just over half of that saved up, which meant I needed about $30,000 more to launch properly. I could have gone to a bank, but getting a business loan without collateral or an established business history was nearly impossible, especially for a tech startup. I could have looked for angel investors, but that would mean giving up equity in something I believed could be huge. The obvious solution, at least in my mind, was to ask my family for help. This wasn't some pie-in-the-sky request. I had a detailed business plan, market research, financial projections, and letters of intent from potential customers. I wasn't asking for charity. I was offering them a chance to invest in what I genuinely believed could be $1 million opportunity. I spent 3 weeks preparing for the conversation. I had the business plan professionally printed and bound. I created a presentation with slides showing market size, competitive analysis, revenue projections, and a clear timeline for profitability. I even had my uncle, who worked in finance, review the numbers to make sure everything looked reasonable. I scheduled dinner at their house for a Sunday evening in March. Joseph was there as usual, lounging in the living room playing Grand Theft Auto while I helped my mother set the table. I'd brought a bottle of wine and flowers for my mom, hoping to set a positive tone for the conversation. During dinner, I waited for the right moment, then launched into my presentation. I started with the market opportunity, explained the problem I was solving, demonstrated the prototype on my laptop, and showed them the letters of intent from potential customers. I've been working on this for the past year. I began pulling out the printed business plan I'd spent dozens of hours perfecting. There's a real need in the construction industry for specialized project management software. The existing solutions are either too generic or too complex. I've built a prototype that addresses this gap, and I've validated the concept with potential customers. My father barely looked at the papers I'd placed in front of him. He was cutting his steak with the mechanical precision of someone who wasn't really paying attention. "Finn, you already have a good job," he said without looking up. "You're making decent money. You've got benefits. You're building a career. Why risk all of that for some pipe dream?" "Because this isn't a pipe dream, Dad. I've done the research. I've validated the concept. Construction companies are dying for better project management tools, and what's available now is either too complex or too generic. This addresses a specific need in a growing market." I opened my laptop and showed them the demo. The interface was clean and intuitive. You could see job timelines, track subcontractor schedules, monitor material deliveries, and generate reports with just a few clicks. "Look at this," I said, clicking through the features. A project manager can see the status of every job in their pipeline. They can identify bottlenecks before they become problems. They can communicate with subcontractors directly through the platform. This solves real problems that cost these companies thousands of dollars in delays and miscommunication. Joseph looked up from his phone long enough to glance at my laptop screen. "Looks complicated," he said, then went back to scrolling through Instagram. My mother chimed in with the comment that still burns in my memory. "Honey, We think it's wonderful that you're so ambitious, but starting a business is incredibly risky. Most of them fail and you don't have any business experience, which is why I need the capital to do this right. I pressed on. I'm not asking you to fund some fantasy. I'm asking for $30,000 to bridge the gap between what I've saved and what I need to launch properly. And it's not a gift. It's an investment. I'll pay you back with interest or you can take equity in the company. I showed them the financial projections. Break even within 18 months. Profitability by year 2. Conservative estimates showing $500,000 in revenue by year 3. My father set down his fork and looked at me with the expression I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The look that said I was being unreasonable. Finn, we're not venture capitalists. We're accountants. We deal in certainties, not may. Starting a tech company is basically gambling, and we don't gamble with our retirement fund. But this isn't gambling, I insisted. I have letters of intent from 12 different construction companies. That's $180,000 in potential first-year revenue. I have a working prototype. I've been in the industry for 6 years. I understand both the technical requirements and the business needs. Letters of intent aren't contracts, my father said dismissively. And potential revenue isn't actual revenue. What happens if these companies decide they don't want your software after all? What happens if a competitor launches something similar? What happens if you can't scale the business? Every question he asked was reasonable from a risk management perspective. But what frustrated me was that these were all solvable problems, not deal breakers. Every business has risks, Dad. But this is a calculated risk with real market validation. I've spent a year researching this opportunity. I've talked to dozens of potential customers. I've analyzed the competition. I've built and tested the product. This isn't some random idea I came up with last week. Joseph, who had been scrolling through his phone during the entire conversation, suddenly looked up. Maybe you should just stick with what you're good at, Finn. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. The dismissiveness in his voice was like a slap in the face. Here was my younger brother, who had never successfully completed anything in his life, telling me to stay in my lane while my parents nodded along. Think about it logically, my father continued. You're asking us to risk a significant amount of money on something that might work out. And even if it does work out, there's no guarantee you'll be successful. The tech industry is brutal. Companies fail all the time, even ones with good ideas and smart people behind them. Every business is a risk, I shot back, feeling my composure starting to crack. But this is a calculated risk with real market validation and proven demand. Finn, my mother said in that patronizing tone I'd heard my entire childhood. We just want what's best for you, and what's best for you is stability. You have a good job, good benefits, a steady paycheck. Don't throw that away chasing some fantasy. The word fantasy hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent a year of my life building something real, something that solved actual problems for real customers. And my own mother was calling it a fantasy. This isn't a fantasy, Mom. This is a legitimate business opportunity. I have customers ready to buy the product. You have potential customers, my father corrected. There's a big difference. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but the outcome was already decided. My parents had made up their minds before I'd even started talking. They weren't evaluating my business plan or considering the opportunity. They were rejecting it based on their preconceived notions about risk and success. My father's final word, we can't support this venture, Finn. It's just too dangerous. We have our own financial future to consider, and we can't afford to lose $30,000 on something that might not work out. I drove home that night feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not just because they'd said no, but because of how they'd said it. Like I was a child with delusions of grandeur instead of an adult with a legitimate business opportunity backed by research and market validation. But here's the thing about rejection. Sometimes it's exactly the motivation you need. I went to work the next morning with a fire in my belly. I'd never felt before. If my family wouldn't believe in me, I'd prove them wrong another way. I spent the next 3 months researching alternative funding options. I applied for a business line of credit using my house as collateral. I looked into SBA loans. I even considered crowdfunding, though that was still a relatively new concept in 2019. The business line of credit turned out to be my best option. It took 3 months of paperwork, financial statements, and meetings with loan officers, but eventually I got approved for $35,000 at 8.5% interest. Combined with my savings, I had enough to move forward with the business. I gave my boss 6 weeks' notice and spent every evening and weekend for the next month and a half preparing for the transition. I incorporated the business, set up accounting systems, leased a small office space, and hired my first employee, a front-end developer I'd worked with at TechFlow, who was excited about joining a startup. By September, I was working on my company full-time. I called it Construct Flow, and our tagline was Project Management Built for Construction. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, ramen noodles for dinner, stress levels that probably took years off my life. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if my parents had been right, if I'd made a terrible mistake leaving a stable job to chase an impossible dream. But slowly, steadily, it started working. My first customer signed up in November, a residential builder in Dallas who'd been in my original research group. My second customer came in January, a commercial contractor in Houston who'd heard about us through word of mouth. By the end of year 1, I had 8 paying customers and $140,000 in annual recurring revenue. Meanwhile, Joseph had a new dream. He decided he wanted to start a luxury car rental company catering to high-end clients who wanted to rent Lamborghinis and Ferraris for special occasions, weddings, anniversaries, prom nights, corporate events. He'd seen something similar in Miami and was convinced it would work in our area. He'd done zero market research, had no experience in the automotive industry, had no understanding of insurance requirements or liability issues, and his business plan consisted of a PowerPoint presentation with pictures of expensive cars he downloaded from manufacturer websites. But he had something I didn't: complete and unwavering support from our parents. The conversation I wasn't supposed to hear happened at a family barbecue in June, about 9 months after they'd turned down my request. My cousin David was getting married and my extended family had gathered at my parents' house for an engagement party. I'd gone inside to use the bathroom and was walking back through the kitchen when I heard my father's voice from the dining room. "We've looked at the numbers and we think we can make it work." He was saying the initial investment is substantial, but Joseph's done his research and the potential returns are impressive. I stopped walking and pressed myself against the kitchen wall just out of sight. "How substantial are we talking about?" I heard my uncle ask. "Well, he'll need about $625,000 total to get started properly. We're looking at taking out a loan against the business and our house, but with the projected revenue, we should be able to pay it back within 3 to 5 years. I stopped breathing. $625,000 for Joseph's luxury car rental fantasy. The same parents who told me that $30,000 was too risky were about to gamble more than $500,000 on my brother's complete lack of a plan. "That's a lot of money, Robert," my uncle said carefully. "It is," my father agreed. "But this is Joseph we're talking about. He's got vision, he's got drive, and he's got connections in the luxury car market. Plus, the rental market is really underserved in our region. There's definitely demand for high-end vehicles." I wanted to walk into that room and ask my father exactly what connections Joseph had and exactly what research he'd done and exactly how luxury car rental was less risky than proven project management software with validated customer demand. "What kind of cars are we talking about?" my aunt asked. "Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, Porsches." Joseph's voice joined the conversation. "High-end stuff that people want to drive but can't afford to own. The rental rates are incredible. We're talking $500 to $1,500 per day, depending on the vehicle." "And the insurance?" my uncle asked. "That's all factored in," Joseph said confidently. "The margins are still excellent even with comprehensive coverage." I seriously doubted Joseph had done any research into specialty insurance for exotic car rentals, which is notoriously expensive and complex. But my parents seemed convinced. "We're so proud of him," my mother said. "He's really thought this through. He's even identified specific vehicle models that offer the best return on investment." I'd heard enough. I slipped out through the back door and sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to process what I just learned. My parents, who'd rejected my business plan because it was too risky, were about to bet their financial future on Joseph's fantasy of renting Lamborghinis to strangers. 2 weeks later, Joseph was driving a brand new BMW M5 that he claimed was part of his fleet research. The car cost $15,000. And according to Joseph, he needed to understand the luxury car market before making decisions about his rental fleet. The BMW was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Joseph bought a used Porsche 911, $75,000, a Lamborghini Huracan, $250,000, and a Ferrari, $488, $300,000. Each purchase was justified as market research or fleet development. But the luxury car rental business never actually launched. Joseph spent his time driving around town in different exotic cars, posting Instagram photos at high-end restaurants and nightclubs, talking about his upcoming business launch while never actually taking steps to create a legitimate company. He did spend tens of thousands of dollars on a website that never went live, marketing materials for a company that never opened, and business development trips to Miami and Las Vegas that were really just expensive vacations where he posed next to other people's luxury cars. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. By year 2, I had 37 customers and $580,000 in annual recurring revenue. I'd hired 4 employees and moved into a larger office space. By year 3, I was closing in on $1 million in revenue and had started getting acquisition offers from larger companies. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents were hemorrhaging money on Joseph's fantasy, I was building exactly the kind of successful tech company they told me was impossible. But the success came with a price. The stress of running a growing business while watching my family implode financially was taking its toll. I'd gained 20 pounds from stress eating and wasn't sleeping well. I'd started avoiding family gatherings because I couldn't stand listening to Joseph talk about his business while my parents nodded along supportively. The first hint that my parents were in serious financial trouble came during a phone call with my mother in November of my 3rd year in business. "Finn, honey, I hope you're doing well with your little software company," she began, which immediately put me on guard because my mother only used that artificially sweet tone when she wanted something. "It's going really well, Mom." "That's great news, dear. We're actually on track to make $1 million this year. Your dad and I were wondering whether you could help us with something. We're having some cash flow issues with the business, and we were hoping you might be able to loan us some money to get through the next few months." I almost laughed. After everything they'd put me through, after rejecting my request for help and then throwing away more than $500,000 on Joseph's delusions, they had the nerve to ask me for money. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" "Well, we'd need about $50,000 to cover some immediate expenses, just until we get back on our feet." "And Joseph, is he contributing to this solution?" There was a long pause. "Joseph is dealing with some challenges right now, Finn. The car rental business didn't work out the way we hoped and is looking for new opportunities." "What kind of challenges?" Another pause. "He's had some legal issues. Some of the cars were repossessed and there are some disputes with creditors. It's all very complicated." Of course, it was complicated. Everything with Joseph was always complicated. I was willing to bet he'd been making payments on luxury cars with credit cards and personal loans. Probably lying to creditors about his income and business prospects. "Mom, I'm sorry you're going through financial difficulties, but I can't just write you a check for $50,000. That's a significant amount of money. And given what happened when I asked for help 3 years ago, I think you can understand why I'm not jumping at the chance to get involved in the family finances." "Finn, this is completely different," she said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I remembered from childhood arguments. "We're not asking you to invest in some risky business venture. We're asking for help from our son during a difficult time." "You mean the same son whose risky business venture you refused to support? The one that's now generating 7 figures in revenue? That's not fair, Finn. We did what we thought was best at the time." "No, Mom. You did what was convenient at the time. You supported Joseph's dreams while dismissing mine, and now you want me to bail you out of the consequences." The conversation ended with my mother in tears and me feeling like the villain for not immediately opening my checkbook. But I'd learned something important over the past 3 years. Financial boundaries are just as important as emotional ones. Over the next 6 months, the calls became more frequent and more desperate. My parents were facing foreclosure on their house. The accounting firm was bleeding clients as word spread about their financial troubles. Joseph had disappeared entirely, apparently living with some girlfriend in Colorado while avoiding the legal consequences of his failed business ventures. I learned through my uncle that the situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Joseph hadn't just bought the luxury cars with loans against my parents' assets. He'd also taken out credit cards in the business name, borrowed against the cars themselves, and even convinced my parents to co-sign on additional loans for business development. The total debt was approaching $800,000, secured against everything my parents owned. The cars had been repossessed, leaving them with massive loans and no assets to show for it. Joseph had fled the state, leaving my parents to deal with angry creditors and potential legal action. The final call came on a Tuesday evening in May. I was at home reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. It was my father and he sounded terrible. "Finn, I need to be completely honest with you. We're going to lose everything. The house, the business, our retirement savings, all of it." "Dad, I'm sorry to hear that. But wait, just let me finish." He interrupted. "I know we haven't always been the most supportive of your business, and I know you're probably angry about the Joseph situation, but we're desperate. We've lost everything betting on your brother, and now we need your help." I waited for him to continue. "A financial expert told us that the only way to save the house is to come up with $180,000 to pay off the debt and change the terms of the loans. We know that's a lot of money, but since your business is doing so well, you want me to give you $180,000. "Not give," he said quickly. "Loan. We'd pay you back as soon as we get back on our feet." "Dad, how exactly do you plan to pay me back? You just told me you're losing the business and facing foreclosure." "Well, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. Our advisor says if you are willing to sell your house and move back home for a while, we could use that money to save everything. It would just be temporary until we get everything sorted out." I actually had to put the phone down for a moment. They wanted me to sell my house. The house I'd worked my ass off to buy. The house I'd used as collateral to start the business they'd refused to support and move back in with them so they could fix the mess they'd made betting on Joseph's fantasies. "Dad, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to sell my house, uproot my life, and move back home so you can avoid the consequences of spending $625,000 on Joseph's failed business? Finn, please don't make this about Joseph. This is about family. This is about helping your parents when we need it most." "No, Dad. This is exactly about Joseph. This entire situation exists because you chose to bet our family's financial future on his delusions while telling me that my actual business plan was too risky. We made mistakes," he admitted. "But we can't change the past. We can only ask for help now." "You're right, Dad. You can't change the past. And the past is that when I needed help, when I had a legitimate business opportunity with real market validation, you told me it was too risky and you couldn't support it. But when Joseph wanted to play with expensive cars, you mortgaged everything you owned to fund his fantasies." "Finn, I'm not finished." I cut him off. "I built this business with my own money, taking my own risks, working 18-hour days for years while you all wrote me off as a failure waiting to happen. And now that it's successful, now that I've proven you wrong, you want me to liquidate everything I've worked for to bail you out." There was silence on the other end of the line. "The answer is no, Dad. I'm not giving you $180,000. I'm not selling my house. I'm not moving back home. You made your choice 3 years ago, and now you get to live with the consequences. Finn, we're your parents. We raised you. We loved you." You loved Joseph," I interrupted. "You raised Joseph. You invested in Joseph. I raised myself and I built this business myself and I'm keeping it myself." I hung up the phone and sat in my living room for a long time, staring out at the yard I'd landscaped myself in the house I'd bought with money I'd earned, thinking about the path that had led me to this moment. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my house. I was working in my home office when I heard the doorbell ring. I glanced out the window and saw my parents' car in the driveway. The same Honda Civic my mother had been driving for 8 years since they'd sold her newer car to help fund Joseph's ventures. I opened the door to find my parents standing on my front porch, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen them. My father had lost weight and there were dark circles under his eyes. My mother looked like she'd been crying for days. "Hello, Finn," my mother said softly. "Mom, Dad." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "What are you doing here?" "We were hoping we could talk," my father said face to face. "It's important. I think we've said everything that needs to be said." "Finn, please," my mother pleaded. "We drove 3 hours to see you. Just give us a few minutes." Against my better judgment, I gestured toward the chairs on my front porch. We sat down and for a moment, nobody spoke. It was a warm afternoon, and I could hear kids playing in the neighbor's backyard. Normal sounds of a normal life, which felt surreal given the conversation I was about to have. Finally, my father broke the silence. "The foreclosure is final. We have 30 days to get out of the house." "I'm sorry to hear that. The business is gone, too. We had to sell it for practically nothing just to pay off some of the debt. Your mother and I are looking at bankruptcy." "Where's Joseph in all this?" My parents exchanged a look. My mother answered, Joseph is in rehab. He has some issues with narcotics, the stress of the business going under and some legal problems. And it's been very hard." That's how it was. The golden child, the one they had put all their money on, was in rehab for drug addiction as they lost their home and business. "We know we messed up," my dad said next. "We know we should have helped your business when you asked. We know we trusted Joseph too much and you too little." "Okay, we're not asking you to fix everything," my mother added. "We just need enough aid to get back on our feet. Maybe help with a small deposit on an apartment till we figure out what's next." I stared at the two people who had nurtured me, fed me, clothed me, and housed me for 18 years. They had also constantly put me down and ignored my successes, betting their future on my brother's failings. "I need you to understand something, Mom and Dad. 3 years ago, when I approached you for help with a business strategy, you didn't just say no. You made me feel dumb for even asking. You told me I was being unreasonable and that I should be thankful for my steady job and quit chasing dreams." They both gazed at their hands. "And less than a year later, you borrowed $625,000 to let Joseph hire a nice automobile. Joseph didn't have a business plan, do any market research, or have any experience in the field. He just said he had a good feeling about pricey automobiles." "We know," my father added in a low voice. "We recognize we made a mistake. Do you?" I got up from my chair. "You still haven't said you're sorry for turning down my business when it could have worked out. Even though you're sitting here begging for my help. You wish you hadn't bet on Joseph. Finn, you don't feel bad that you didn't bet on me. That's not right." My mom started. "Yes, Mom. You came here because you need money, not because you know you were unjust to me. Would you be here to say sorry for not helping me if Joseph's business had worked out and you weren't about to lose your home?" They both didn't answer. "You have never seen me as anything but a backup plan. The one who will always be there to clean up the mess. Well, I'm done being the backup plan." I walked to the front door and then turned around to look at them. "For 3 years, I've labored 16 hours a day to develop what you said was impossible. I showed that my risky notion was really a good business chance. I've done well even if you didn't help me." My mother begged Finn, her eyes full of sorrow. "We'll pay you back no matter how long it takes." "With what cash? You just told me that you lost both the house and the business. You don't have any money or property. What are you going to give me back?" "Please, we'll figure something out," my father said. "We'll find work. We will work. We'll do what we have to do. You're 62 years old, Dad. You're 59 years old, Mom. You've only ever worked at your own accounting firm. What occupations will you be able to find that will let you pay back tens of thousands of dollars while also taking care of yourselves?" It felt like the truth was hanging between us like a heavy weight. "No, The answer is no. I said it strongly. I won't give you any money. I'm not going to assist you find a place to live. I won't co-sign any loans. You can't move in with me. You made your choice when you thought Joseph's dreams were more important than my proven business plan. Now you have to deal with the choice you made. How can you be so cruel? My mom cried. We are your parents. And I'm your kid. The son you disregarded, dismissed, and overlooked throughout his whole life. You still can't accept your son's accomplishment, even though you're sitting here asking for help. I opened the entrance to my house. I think you should go immediately. Slowly, my dad got up. He lost and his shoulders fell. I won't change my mind. Finn. I saw them walk to their car, and I almost yelled at them at one point. I almost told them to wait and almost gave them something to make the pain I saw on their faces go away. But then I remembered how I felt 3 years ago when I sat in their dining room, laid out my business plan, explained my vision, asked for their help, and heard my father say it was too dangerous while my brother sneered and encouraged me to stick to what I was good at. I remembered the months that followed when I worked 18-hour days, ate ramen noodles, and worried about every cost as they spent 20 times more than I had asked for on Joseph's dream car. I remembered all the times when Joseph's mediocrity was praised and my accomplishments were ignored. All the times I was told to be thankful for what I had while Joseph got all he desired and I shut the door. That happened 6 months ago. I haven't heard from them since YouTube added this new feature that everyone is talking about. If you can't stop thinking about this article, hit that hype button. It tells YouTube, this video should go viral, and it keeps sending you crazier stories.